Hey, everybody, welcome to Tier 1 Interventions Podcast. We are here today to talk about a geoboard. Geoboard is a very interesting device. And when I first looked at it, I only saw it from an occupational therapy perspective where we were working on it with hand strengthening and such. But I come to see how valuable it is as a math tool as well. Today, we are going to blend the math and the occupational therapy together so that you can understand better what it looks like to have a geoboard as a intervention in your classroom. Welcome, Lee, to today's episode and everybody else who is with us. It is great to have you here.
The final chunk is grid paper. So grid paper is different than dot paper. So chunk number 4, solution number 4, and I will just keep scrolling to centimeter grid paper or any grid or graph paper. Sarah had asked the question before, what comes first, the actual geoboard or the dot paper? And it's really chicken and egg, it doesn't matter. However, if kids are struggling using graph paper or grid paper, so if I have a student that I say, okay, draw a 5x5 square. I'm going to make this a little bit bigger just so we can see it. Draw a 5x5 square, and they don't trace the line. If they're just like, oh, okay, and then they put it, just totally, the lines are just irrelevant to them. And we see this a lot in the earlier grades, but even in the upper grades, I will see a lot where kids, if I ask them to draw a 5x5 square, like 6th, 7th, and 8th graders, they start in the middle of the square. So they'll go down like this 5 squares, and then they'll go over, and then they'll go up, and then they'll go over here using grid paper, okay? Now, I use this as a teaching moment because I then use this square and I say to the whole class, let's find the area and perimeter of this. Because this student and many other students will want the length to be 5. So 4 5s is 20, perimeter 20. And then they want this to be 5x5, so area 25. That is not true. That is not true. Because if I cut out, see, and I brought this ruler piece too for the, come on, turn the radio on. See, did not break out in music today. So just like with the dot paper where we cut our measuring tool, I have kids cut out a measuring tool with the graph paper. When we put this up here, look at this. What is the length of this side? The length of that side is actually 4 because I have, and if I move this, see, this is where we want kids. Oh, don't move that. Come on. Oh, no. Yes. We want kids, if I line this up on the lines here, what we notice here is, stop. Okay. Collaborate and listen. What we notice here is this length is 1. This length is 1. This length is 1. So this middle part here is 3. And then we have a half and a half. And that's how we get the 4. So this is actually a 4x4. So the area should be 16. And it is because I have this exact 3x3. So this area right here is 9. And then this, how much is that? That's a quarter of this square. So I have 1/4, 2/4, 3/4. Oh, that's another 1. So that makes 10. And then I have this half. I actually have 3 sets of 4 halves, 12 halves, which is another 6. Hence, a 4x4 has an area of 16. Now, here's my point. Here's my point. If students are struggling with graph paper and grid paper, especially older students who have precision, see, this is an example of precision also. Precision is being able to stay right in the middle of these lines, but it's not accurate for a 5x5. What this student needs and what this student needs is to go to the grid paper. Because if I say draw a 5x5, they don't even think of starting here because there's no dot. Remember connecting the dots, count by dot pages in books that you can't even do the like count by number, dot to dots. I can't even find those anymore in stores. So that is a lost skill that kids used to practice all the time. However, it's pretty innate. You don't get that innateness with grid paper, but if you do dot paper instead of grid paper, kids are much more successful connecting dots than tracing the lines on the graph paper. So then what we can do is go from the dot paper to transition and say, and what I can do is I can do grid paper that I put dots on to show that the dots are actually at the vertices of those squares. So kids can start to trace to understand how to use graph paper. Another thing that my older, oh,
Can
yep,
I
go ahead.
stop you before you go too much further from that?
Yes.
That also could be a vision issue with the kids, that they, in their brain, see it that they are on the line, where we see that it is not. They could also have motor control. One thing that we can do instead of a traditional ruler is get one of these rulers that is in a triangular shape. It's a foot long, like a regular ruler would be. It's the triangular shape. They can put their hand on the top as they're trying to trace. They're not down here like a regular ruler. Their hands get too close together. Their hand is up above, pushing down on the paper so that they have the control. So if you get out the ruler to go with supporting them creating the line, which adds more complication, believe me. You can also have some of these available, and they're available through Real OT Solutions. They are called Alpha Triangles. I don't know of any other company that's making a ruler with the triangular shape, but they will help the students as well. But it could be literally be a vision tracking issue that they are not able to be on the line.
Other thoughts? So a point on not being able to be on the lines shows up also when we are having kids create XY axes on graph paper and they tend to not put it on the lines as well. We want kids to practice that and practice tracing. But one intervention is instead of giving the graph paper, give the kids dot paper to do the XY axis. It's a great accommodation and intervention to use the dot paper instead of the graph paper, and use the dot paper and the graph paper, because we want kids to eventually be able to do both. So here's the progression. Here's the progression. We use the physical geoboard. So I think this sums up this whole series today. We use the physical geoboard to create the grid, the X and Y axis. Okay. So we have the physical geoboard. So if this is my origin, the 0, 0 point, then this is my 1, 1 point. I can name these dots as ordered pairs so I can physically do the XY axis. The second step in the progression is to do dot paper XY axis because it's much easier for students to connect the dots than it is for them to trace the line on the grid paper. So using the dot paper first, then then using grid paper that also has the dots so that they start to make the connection of where the hidden dots are on the grid paper so that the grid paper becomes a more dot to dot. But then the other thing that is absolutely essential is having kids trace. So even if I give them a grid paper with an X and Y axis, I'm going to have them take a thick marker or a highlighter and I'm going to have them trace the X and Y axis, even if I create it for them. Sometimes I want to create it for them and have them trace. Sometimes I want to give them the dots and have them do it themselves. And then sometimes I want them to do it themselves on the graph paper. So this is a gradual release of responsibility, and it's going to help students become independent doing something themselves that they're currently unable to do. We do the physical, we do the dot paper, we do the dot and the grid with the lines, with the tracing, and then just the tracing. And then finally, they're going to start to be able to trace the lines on the graph paper. Graph paper is absolutely essential at the secondary level. It's where we do most of our mathematics, whether we're doing geometry or algebra, functions, shapes, coordinate plane, transformations. Graph paper is essential, and too many kids at the secondary level struggle with graph paper. So if I'm a secondary teacher, I'm going to go back to the geoboard to represent. Then I'm going to go to the dot paper. Then I'm going to go to the grid paper with the dots, and then just the grid paper, tracing on the grid paper, and then just the grid paper. I'm going to go through that cycle multiple times with all students because what's necessary for some is beneficial for all. It's a different texture and it's a different sensory. So even students who aren't struggling with the graph paper and aren't struggling with the tool and aren't struggling with the math will still benefit from the progression of the concrete to the semi-concrete to the abstract. And that, my friends, is section 4. Now we've come to the most abstract geoboard, which is the grid paper, and how we can use these interventions and accommodations with the grid paper as well. A couple of things that we definitely want to create content for you as I've been making my notes is steepness of those diagonal lines. We want to get into that. Not only the diagonal lines of squares and rectangles, but how many triangles can be created inside any polygon so that we can understand angle measurements of regular polygons, and then lots to unpack with circles. So we've got some other chunks that we're going to want to bring content to you that is going to be very much related to this. But that wraps up chunk number 4, the grid paper, and how we can progressively move struggling students from actual geoboard to using graph paper and being highly functional with graph paper at the secondary level mathematically.
So
Cheri.
for occupational therapists, utilizing those progressions that John Lee lined out will help us in our upgrading and downgrading of helping our students manipulate the different types of paper that we might present to them. When we're looking at design copying, think about how it is related to the geoboard and the mathematics. It's looking at the design copying activity from a whole different perspective, because I've never looked at it from that perspective before. But students struggle to do those complicated designs like that, and they also will have trouble putting them on the physical geoboard.
Which is why unstructured play with the geoboard and dot paper, just unstructured, unfacilitated play in just creating pictures, images, or abstracts is not only going to benefit students non academically and functionally, but it's going to benefit students mathematically because they are going to have a feel, a sense, a taste, a touch, a smell. It's going to engage all of their senses in how shape and images work mathematically so that then we can attend to precision when we're defining shape, function, using those tools, which students have a hard time mathematically and non-mathematically.
My mind is blown today. Oh my gosh. Oh my gosh. So many things.
Give us a few takeaways, Natalie.
I one thing I wrote in the chat earlier, I feel pretty good with my content, but then picking up these brain science things is like the next maybe big layer for me. I'm really excited to continue to learn more and just dive more into that and just seeing that connection, just knowing that the whiteboards work for my students, but then now being able to pinpoint specific students and oh, okay, I'm seeing that more. And even was thinking further, like one kid writes oh, ridiculous. This doesn't even look like handwriting on paper, but at the board, I can read everything he writes. It's I never made that connection till today. I'm like, okay, I'm just developing those different things. So I'm really excited to, and I think really important to learn more about the brain science and make those connections. But just even the connection to content and pizza problem and diagonals and like thinking about parallelograms and area and all the things. I'm just, oh, I'm so excited. What a great session. So excited.
So when
Awesome.
you
Awesome.
when he's so Natalie, so when he's working at his desk, not everybody has access to a slant board, but you can use a binder. Just give him a binder and see if that works for him. And just put his worksheet on the binder, a 3-ring binder. You can have various sizes. Just see if that works for him and see if just changing the height of his paper helps him.
I will try that.
Great idea.
The binding being away from him so that it's on
Right.
the slant this way.
Sometimes they collapse and you just stick stuff in it to stop the collapse, but otherwise they're inexpensive. They probably have them in the building. 3, 3, 2, 1. You can vary the size based on what he needs.
Which
Mhm.
creates that slant using a, yeah, couple inch binder. Dang, yes, that's so easy. Do you know how many schools throw away 2-inch binders? Collect those things and use them for slant
And you know what you
surfaces.
can use them for too? Is you can
Yeah.
use them as a wedge on your seat. So you know how kids you can turn them so that the wedge goes so they angle you put the 3 to the front so they angle them back in the seat or the other way around so they can angle either direction. All you do is put some nice tape on it and make it nice and sturdy because you may not have the money. I don't have a budget to
Yeah.
do anything. So you just make them nice and sturdy and you can make them as wedges for the chair.
And duct tape,
Duct tape them
tape
up.
cover.
Yeah.
So it's almost the end of the year.
There you go.
Kids throwing away binders, 1-inch, 2-inch, 3-inch binders. Collect all the old binders and cover them with duct tape to make them sturdy. You've got slant surfaces and you've got sitting slanted surfaces.
Or for the feet on the
But
bottom, if a kid can't, you gotta make sure their feet are stable on the floor. Stack a couple. There you go. You got your
Footrest.
feet touching the floor.
Love it.
watch the duct tape and the writing surfaces
Okay.
because that will influence their writing because of the duct tape texture. One thing that you can do then if you're going to use it for a writing surface is put construction paper over the duct tape. It will help buffer that texture a little bit. It won't solve it all. But if you're writing on construction paper, it's a better blot feel than even writing on the hard desk. So that's
Beautiful.
another alternative to kids who are struggling to even get the line lined up on the grid is put construction paper underneath the paper they're writing on. It creates a blotter and then they get a better feel and feedback into their hands as to where they're writing.
Oh my gosh, that is the most golden thing from today. Kids struggling with the tracing or the grid paper, put a piece of construction paper under the paper they're working on. That is so magnificently brilliant. That is my big takeaway.
I was so excited to get to this one. Sorry, Krista, I just interrupt you because it's so OT and
Yeah.
it's so math. This one was so much fun. Go ahead, Krista.
It's not okay. So this might be a little too much fourth wall, but I really enjoyed the facilitation of, I felt like it was the best integration that I have seen yet. Like the toggle back and forth.
Okay.
This is the math. These are the interventions that when you see this happening, this is what this means. This is what you can do from a gen ed perspective. I thought that this was the best I have been able to see how this all works together.
Great feedback, Krista.
I think it was the most direct, interactive
Yeah.
one of your tasks, Jonathan.
And I think there's so much more content that can come from it. And we thought about that, Krista, because that is the one thing that we struggle with. We know that each of our expertise and areas are so connected, but how we articulate that to people is a huge struggle. And we knew that going into this. And I really appreciate your feedback on that because we know that it's clunky. We know that it's clunky, and we ourselves have been working very strategically and very diligently on how to make that better connection so that we can offer the same presentation to multi audiences at the same time, to the OT audience and the classroom teacher audience at the same time. So that is really great feedback. And I think definitely we are going to continue to work on that as well. Thank you.